Blood drips from Carl Rollins's temple as Officer Walsh presses the barrel of his gun to his head. "Just another black criminal," Walsh sneered. Carl locked eyes with his wife Denise across the room. The subtle nod between them was imperceptible to everyone but them. The trap was set. Before we dive into this intense story about racial injustice and undercover FBI agents, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to show support for more stories like this. Now let's see how Carl and Denise found themselves in this life-threatening situation and what happens when law enforcement targets the wrong black couple. Carl and Denise Rollins were elite FBI agents in their early 40s with over 15 years of distinguished careers in undercover operations. Their expertise in infiltrating criminal organizations had earned them numerous commendations from the Bureau. On a crisp Monday morning in September, they were summoned to FBI headquarters in Atlanta for a special briefing. Assistant Director Jameson welcomed them into a secure conference room where the walls were covered with photos, reports, and newspaper clippings. "We have a disturbing pattern in Claiborne County." Jameson began pointing to a map of Georgia with the county highlighted. "Over the past 3 years, there's been a statistically impossible spike in arrests, convictions, and property seizures targeting black citizens." He clicked through a slideshow showing mugshots of dozens of black men and women. 3 suspicious deaths in custody, all ruled accidents or self-defense by the department. Denise studied the photos carefully, her analytical mind already searching for connections. Carl's jaw tightened as he recognized the familiar pattern they'd seen too many times before. "We've had multiple complaints filed with the Civil Rights Division," Jameson continued, "but the Sheriff's Department has managed to block every investigation. We need solid evidence of systematic discrimination and corruption." The assignment was clear but dangerous. Carl and Denise would pose as a middle-class couple moving to Claiborne to open a small business. Their real mission was to investigate Sheriff James Holloway and his department for civil rights violations, corruption, and possible connections to hate groups. For Carl, this case struck deeper than professional duty. Growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, he'd experienced the sting of racial profiling firsthand. At 16, officers had thrown him against a police car, assuming he'd stolen the new bicycle his parents had saved for months to buy him. Even after joining the FBI, he'd been stopped by police while driving in his own neighborhood, asked to prove he belonged there. Denise had her own memories that fueled her commitment to justice. The daughter of civil rights activists, she'd watched her father endure harassment from local police in Mississippi for simply registering voters. Her exceptional academic performance and law degree from Howard University had opened doors, but she never forgot the lessons her parents taught her about fighting systemic injustice from within. The couple spent 2 weeks preparing their cover identities. They would be Carl and Denise Rollins, married 15 years, moving from Chicago to open a specialty coffee shop. Their background documents showed Carl had inherited money from a deceased uncle, explaining their capital investment. The Bureau arranged for them to purchase a modest 3-bedroom home in Oakwood Estates, an affluent, predominantly white neighborhood in Claiborne. "Remember," their handler Agent Thompson warned during final preparations, "Sheriff Holloway has connections throughout the county. Trust no one." They arrived in Claiborne on a Sunday afternoon, a moving truck following their SUV into the driveway of their new home. The neighborhood featured well-maintained lawns, American flags, and an unsettling quiet that greeted their arrival. As they unloaded boxes, they noticed curtains moving in windows across the street, neighbors watching but not welcoming. That evening, while unpacking, Carl and Denise discreetly installed state-of-the-art surveillance equipment throughout their home. What appeared to be ordinary smoke detectors, light fixtures, and electrical outlets contained high-definition cameras and microphones, all feeding to a secure server accessed only by their FBI team. "First impressions?" Carl asked as they sat on their back porch watching the sunset. Denise sipped her tea thoughtfully. 3 neighbors walked by while I was planting those flowers. Not one made eye contact or said hello. Carl nodded. The cashier at the grocery store double-checked my credit card against my ID. Didn't do it for the white guy in front of me. They discussed their strategy for the coming weeks, integrate into the community befriend law enforcement document every interaction, and identify patterns of discrimination. We need to be visible enough to attract attention, but not suspicious enough to blow our cover, Denise said. Fine line to walk. Their first night in their new home, they heard a car slowly drive by 3 times. Looking through the blinds, Carl recognized the distinct silhouette of a police cruiser. Already on their radar, he whispered. Denise squeezed his hand. Good. That's exactly where we want to be. The following morning, they ventured into downtown Claiborne, noting the clear demographic divide. White-owned businesses occupied prime locations, while black-owned establishments were relegated to side streets in less desirable areas. When they entered the county administration building to file their business permit application, the receptionist's smile faltered upon seeing them. You folks sure you have the right office? She asked, skepticism evident in her tone. We're absolutely sure, Denise replied, with practiced warmth, while Carl noted the interaction in his mental log. By the end of their first day in town, the facade of Southern hospitality had already revealed cracks exposing the underlying hostility beneath forced smiles and insincere welcomes. 3 days after moving in, Carl and Denise received a flyer inviting them to the annual Oakwood Estates Community Barbecue. Perfect opportunity, Carl said, studying the pastel-colored invitation. The event was held at a community park with dozens of families gathered around smoking grills and picnic tables decorated with red and blue tablecloths. As they approached with a homemade peach cobbler, conversations quieted momentarily before resuming with artificial enthusiasm. Well, look who decided to join us, a tall man with silver hair announced, approaching with an outstretched hand. Tom Bennett, Homeowners Association president. We don't get many new folks around here. His emphasis on new folks didn't go unnoticed by either agent. Denise offered her warmest smile. Denise Rollins, and this is my husband, Carl. We're so excited to be part of this beautiful community. They navigated through forced pleasantries and veiled curiosity from their neighbors. What brings you people to our little town? Asked a woman who introduced herself as Barbara, the local elementary school principal. Just looking for a quieter life, Carl replied, noting her use of you people. We're opening a coffee shop downtown. This information spread quickly through the gathering. Downtown, one man repeated with raised eyebrows. That area is changing, not what it used to be. Another neighbor approached Denise as she was serving herself potato salad. You might want to consider the shopping plaza on the north side instead, she suggested in a hushed tone. More of your clientele up there. Denise maintained her cover perfectly. Oh, what kind of clientele is that? The woman stammered. You know, more diverse. Midway through the barbecue, a police cruiser pulled into the park. Sheriff James Holloway stepped out, a commanding figure in his crisp uniform, adorned with an excessive number of pins and badges. He moved through the crowd like a politician, shaking hands and clapping shoulders. When he reached Carl and Denise, his smile remained fixed, but his eyes turned calculating. Our newcomers, he said, his deep southern drawl stretching each syllable. Welcome to Claiborne County. He held Carl's handshake, a beat too long, his grip unnecessarily firm. Coffee shop business. I hear interesting investment for these economic times. We believe in this community, Denise replied smoothly. Holloway's gaze lingered on her. Well, we sure hope you folks know what you're getting into. The implied threat hung in the air between them. Over the next week, Carl and Denise noticed patrol cars driving by their house at regular intervals. That's the third one today, Carl noted, peeking through the blinds as another cruiser crawled past their driveway. They're not even trying to be subtle. Denise discovered their mail had been tampered with, envelopes carefully opened and resealed. Their business license application was delayed due to processing issues. According to the clerk, though a white couple who applied after them received approval within 24 hours. The surveillance intensified their resolve. One afternoon, while driving home from a supply shopping trip, Carl spotted a disturbing scene. Two deputies had a black teenager pressed against the hood of a patrol car. The boy, no older than 16, wore a private school uniform and appeared terrified. Carl pulled over, activating the concealed camera in his watch. "Everything okay here?" he called out, approaching cautiously. "Official police business," the older deputy snapped. "Move along." Carl stood his ground. "I live just down the street. Is this young man in trouble?" The teenager's eyes pleaded for help. "Sir, please," the second deputy said, hand moving to his holster. "This doesn't concern you." Carl introduced himself as a new resident, expressing concern in the measured tones of someone who didn't understand the unwritten rules. After a tense standoff, the deputies released the teenager with a warning about loitering, though he had clearly been simply walking home from school. That evening, their FBI handler confirmed what they suspected. The Claiborne Sheriff's Department had run extensive background checks on them, searching for any discrepancies in their cover. "They're interested," Agent Thompson said during their secure call. Holloway personally requested the checks. 2 days later, Sheriff Holloway and Deputy Chief Rayburn made an unannounced visit to the storefront Carl and Denise had leased for their coffee shop. "Just welcoming new business owners," Holloway claimed, but his questions focused suspiciously on their financing. "Coffee business has slim margins," Rayburn commented, running his finger along a newly installed countertop. "Requires quite an investment up front." Carl played the part of an enthusiastic entrepreneur. "My uncle left us some money. Figured we'd put it to good use." Holloway nodded slowly. "Family money. Interesting." After they left, Denise whispered, "They didn't believe a word you said." "Good," Carl replied. "Let them keep digging." While establishing their cover, they gathered evidence methodically. Denise photographed deputies conducting seemingly random traffic stops that disproportionately targeted black drivers. Carl documented how white-owned businesses received preferential treatment from county inspectors. Through careful observation, they identified a pattern. Black residents who appeared financially successful faced the most harassment. That night, they were awakened by sounds from their backyard. Through security cameras, they watched two deputies systematically searching their shed and garden using flashlights and moving with practiced efficiency. "No warrant, no probable cause," Denise whispered as they observed from their bedroom. Textbook Fourth Amendment violation. They pretended to be asleep, allowing the deputies to continue their illegal search while hidden cameras recorded every moment. The following morning, Denise discovered a tracking device magnetically attached to the undercarriage of her car. Instead of removing it, she left it in place, now fully aware they were under surveillance. "They're getting bolder," Carl noted as they discussed the development during a secure call with their handler. "Or more desperate," Denise countered. "They're trying to find something, anything to justify their suspicions about us." "Keep gathering evidence," Agent Thompson instructed. "We need a clear pattern of misconduct before we can move." What the Claiborne Sheriff's Department didn't realize was that every aggressive action against the Rawlinses strengthened the federal case being built against them. 2 weeks into their assignment, Carl spotted a potential opening in the department's United Front. Deputy Nathan Taylor, a younger officer with only 3 years on the force, seemed uncomfortable during some of the more aggressive interactions with black residents. During a community safety meeting at the town hall, Carl strategically positioned himself next to Taylor at the refreshment table. "Quite a turnout," Carl commented casually, pouring coffee for them both. Taylor accepted the cup with a nod. "Sheriff likes to show community engagement. Looks good for the budget meetings." Carl noted the slight cynicism in his tone. "You've been with the department long." Their conversation remained superficial, but Carl detected something in Taylor's demeanor. Hesitation, perhaps even guilt. Over the next few days, Carl engineered several accidental meetings with Taylor, gradually building rapport. At the local gym, at the hardware store, even at the diner, where Taylor ate lunch most days. Meanwhile, Denise focused on connecting with black business owners in Claiborne. She visited a beauty salon owned by Loretta Jackson, whose initial wariness dissolved into cautious friendship after several appointments. "You need to be careful with that coffee shop," Loretta warned one afternoon, voice barely above a whisper, even though they were alone in the shop. Last Black-owned cafe downtown had mysterious health code violations every month until they closed. Denise expressed appropriate concern and confusion, encouraging Loretta to continue. "It's not just inspections. Insurance rates mysteriously double, deliveries get delayed, and God help you if you call the police for anything." Similar conversations with other Black business owners revealed a disturbing pattern. Those who succeeded despite the obstacles faced escalating harassment from the sheriff's department. Some reported having cash or property seized during traffic stops, never to be returned. Others described deputies conducting random inspections that inevitably found violations in Black-owned establishments while ignoring the same issues in white-owned businesses. Do you believe systemic racism can hide behind a badge of authority? Comment number 1. If you think law enforcement should be held to higher standards of racial equality, or number 2, if you believe these are just isolated incidents. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support more stories exposing injustice. What secrets will Carl and Denise uncover as they dig deeper into Claiborne County's corrupt system? Through careful documentation, Carl and Denise discovered that assets seized from Black residents were being systematically redistributed. Sheriff Holloway drove a new truck every year. Deputy Chief Rayburn had recently built a lake house that his salary couldn't possibly afford. Several deputies wore luxury watches and took expensive vacations. On Sunday, the Rawlinses attended services at First Baptist Church, one of the few integrated congregations in the county. After the service, Pastor Michael Warren approached them in the fellowship hall. "The Lord brings people where they're needed most," he said cryptically. "Claiborne has its challenges." His careful phrasing suggested he understood more than he could safely express. "We've noticed," Denise replied equally carefully. Pastor Warren leaned closer. "The Jacksons 2 rows behind you. Their son has been in county lockup for 3 months. Accused of drug possession. Honor roll student, no record." As more members approached to greet the newcomers, Warren concluded with, "Be careful, eyes everywhere." That afternoon, Carl followed Deputy Taylor and witnessed a troubling scene. Taylor and 2 other deputies conducted an unannounced search of a Black family's home, claiming they'd received reports of assault, suspicious activity. No warrant was presented. The family stood helplessly on their front lawn as officers ransacked their home. Taylor participated, but appeared increasingly uncomfortable, especially when his colleagues joked about damaging personal items. The next day, Denise visited the county clerk's office, presenting herself as a researcher studying economic development trends. The clerk, flattered by her interest and charmed by her demeanor, allowed her access to public records of property transfers and civil forfeitures. After hours of meticulous research, the pattern became undeniable. Over 80% of civil asset forfeitures in Claiborne County targeted Black property owners, despite Black residents comprising only 22% of the population. Every week, Carl and Denise transmitted their findings to Agent Thompson during carefully orchestrated meetings in a neighboring county. "We're building a solid case," Thompson assured them during one such meeting at a roadside diner 30 miles from Claiborne. "But we need direct evidence of Holloway's involvement. Right now, he could claim these are actions of rogue deputies." As their investigation deepened, Sheriff Holloway's interest in the couple intensified. Deputies questioned their neighbors about the Rawlinses' activities and habits. The couple deliberately maintained a routine that appeared normal, but allowed them to document police misconduct throughout the county. One evening, while driving home from their nearly completed coffee shop, Carl was pulled over by deputies Rayburn and Harris. "License and registration," Rayburn demanded, without explaining the reason for the stop. Carl complied while activating his concealed recording devices. "Mind stepping out of the vehicle, sir?" The "sir" dripped with contempt. For the next 20 minutes, Carl endured a humiliating roadside interrogation. The deputies searched his car without consent, questioned his presence in this part of town, and made thinly veiled threats about what happens to troublemakers in Claiborne County. Carl maintained his cover identity despite the degrading treatment, knowing every word was being recorded as evidence. "Your kind would be smart to keep a low profile around here," Rayburn concluded before finally allowing him to leave. That night, as Carl recounted the experience to Denise, they made a breakthrough discovery. Their surveillance of Sheriff Holloway's movements revealed he regularly visited a remote hunting cabin registered to a local businessman named Victor Simmons. Research into Simmons uncovered his ties to several white supremacist groups operating in the region. "This could be the connection we've been looking for," Denise said, reviewing the findings. The next day, they rented a boat and navigated to a position with a clear view of the cabin using high-powered cameras to photograph a meeting between Holloway Simmons and several known extremists. The conversation couldn't be recorded, but the association itself was damning evidence of Holloway's extracurricular affiliations. "Holloway is getting nervous," Carl observed that evening. "The questions from his deputies are getting more specific. They're trying to find anything suspicious about us," Denise agreed. "We need to give them something to find, something that will bring this to a head while we control the narrative." They decided to accelerate their plan, knowing the risks were escalating with each passing day. The grand opening of Rollins Brew, the coffee shop Carl and Denise had been preparing for weeks, attracted curious residents from throughout Claiborne. The couple had transformed the once vacant storefront into a welcoming space with comfortable seating, local artwork, and the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans. Most white customers entered with visible apprehension, surprised by the upscale atmosphere and professional service. Black customers expressed quiet support, though many seemed nervous about being seen patronizing a black-owned business downtown. Midway through the busy opening day, Sheriff Holloway made his appearance flanked by deputies Rayburn and Harris. The casual conversations throughout the shop dimmed as customers noticed the law enforcement presence. "Quite the establishment you've put together," Holloway remarked, removing his hat but not his sunglasses as he surveyed the shop. "Must have cost a pretty penny." Carl maintained his friendly entrepreneur persona. "We believed Claiborne deserved something special." Holloway ran his finger along a gleaming espresso machine. "Italian import, not cheap." Denise offered him a complimentary coffee, which he accepted without thanks. "Heard you folks might be expanding soon." The sheriff continued, his tone deliberately casual. "More investments coming," Carl played into the opening. "Actually, yes. We're considering adding a bakery section next month. Significant cash outlay, but the market research looks promising." He watched the sheriff's eyes sharpen with interest. "Significant cash, you say? How's that work exactly? Bank loans?" Carl lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Let's just say we prefer to keep certain transactions between ourselves and our suppliers. Fewer complications that way." The sheriff smiled for the first time. "Smart business, very smart." After Holloway and his deputies left, Carl and Denise exchanged knowing looks. The bait had been taken. The following day, they noticed increased police presence around their business and home. Patrol cars parked across from the coffee shop for hours. Deputies followed customers who left the establishment. When Denise drove to a supplier in the next county, a Claiborne cruiser followed her the entire route. While reviewing their security footage that evening, they spotted two plainclothes officers photographing their home from a parked car down the street. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," Denise observed. The intensity of the surveillance confirmed they were making progress, but it also increased their danger. The next morning, Denise nearly had a serious accident when her car's brakes responded sluggishly on a steep hill. A mechanic's inspection revealed the brake line had been partially cut. "Not enough to fail immediately, Bob," the mechanic explained, "but enough to give out after some use." They reported the tampering to Agent Thompson during their next secure meeting. "They're escalating faster than anticipated," Thompson warned. "We can pull you out now, put together what we have." Carl shook his head. We're close. They're getting desperate, which means they're vulnerable to making mistakes. Denise agreed. We need direct evidence of Holloway's involvement. Right now, it's all circumstantial. They continued building their case while setting the final trap. One evening, they staged an argument in their backyard, loud enough for neighbors to overhear. I don't care about the risks, Carl shouted. We need that money to cover our debts, Denise responded with equal volume. You promised me we were done with that life. We came here for a fresh start. The performance continued for several minutes with Carl, eventually storming out and driving away angrily. Their neighbors' curtains twitched with interest, and they knew the information would reach the sheriff's department by morning. The following day, Carl met secretly with local black community leaders in a church basement in the neighboring county, collecting signed affidavits about police harassment, illegal searches, and asset seizures. Pastor Warren had arranged the meeting, bringing together victims who had previously been too frightened to come forward. This has been going on for generations, explained an elderly man who had lost his farm to civil forfeiture. Holloway just perfected the system. The testimonies revealed that several previous black business owners had fled town after escalating police harassment. Some had been arrested on fabricated charges. Others had their businesses seized through civil asset forfeiture. Many had simply left, abandoning their investments rather than risk worse consequences. Sheriff calls it cleaning up the town, one woman explained through tears. Been happening since his daddy was sheriff before him. Meanwhile, Denise discovered that Sheriff Holloway had organized a community safety meeting for that evening. Through their network of surveillance, they learned the real purpose, discussing the suspicious newcomers who were asking too many questions. They're setting something up, Denise told Carl when he returned. Their suspicions were confirmed when Mrs. Bennett from across the street approached Denise in the grocery store. The woman glanced around nervously before speaking. I'm not one to get involved, but my husband came home from the sheriff's meeting last night very concerned. They were asking a lot of questions about you and Carl. Denise feigned confusion. Questions? What kind of questions? Mrs. Bennett lowered her voice. About your finances, your background. Sheriff Holloway told everyone to report any unusual activities at your house. She hesitated. People are talking. You might want to be careful. That evening, during their encrypted communication with Agent Thompson, they received troubling news. The Bureau needs more concrete evidence to move forward with indictments, Thompson explained. The U.S. Attorney wants ironclad proof of Holloway's personal involvement in civil rights violations. We need to force their hand, Carl said after the call ended. Make them show themselves completely. They decided to accelerate their plan. The next morning, Carl made a phone call from their kitchen, knowing deputies were likely monitoring their communications. Yeah, it's all set for Friday, he said loudly. The supplier will have everything ready. $200,000 cash deal, no questions asked. This score will solve all our problems. He paused, as if listening. No, the wife doesn't need to know details. Just make sure your guys are ready when I give the signal. After hanging up, he noticed a patrol car slowly passing their house. The trap was set. The deputies' surveillance became impossible to ignore. Wherever Carl and Denise went, Claiborne County Sheriff's vehicles followed at an obvious distance. When they visited their coffee shop, a patrol car parked directly across the street. When they drove to neighboring towns, deputies followed them to the county line, where another cruiser would mysteriously appear to continue the tale. They're not even pretending anymore, Carl remarked, as they spotted Deputy Harris photographing them from his cruiser while they ate dinner at a local restaurant. The couple used the surveillance to their advantage, deliberately creating scenes that would feed into the department's suspicions. At the restaurant, Denise initiated a heated argument that other diners couldn't help overhearing. I told you I'm done with your schemes, she hissed loud enough for nearby tables. You promised me we were going straight when we moved here. Carl responded with calculated defensiveness. Keep your voice down. This is different. One last job, and we're set for life. When Deputy Harris leaned forward in his seat to listen, they abruptly changed the subject to mundane coffee shop business. Back at home, they strategically placed false evidence throughout their house, knowing deputies would likely attempt another illegal search. Blueprint papers showing bank layouts were hidden in Carl's desk drawer. Security system diagrams were tucked into a book on finance. A notebook with scribbled guard schedules and alarm codes was placed under their mattress. The next phase involved visiting several banks in neighboring counties, making sure they were followed. At each location, Carl would go inside while Denise waited in the car, creating the impression he was casing potential targets. They took photographs of security camera placements and teller stations behaving just suspiciously enough to concern bank employees without triggering immediate calls to law enforcement. To further bait the trap, Carl arranged a meeting with an associate at a truck stop 20 miles outside Claiborne. The associate was actually another FBI agent posing as a known criminal contact. Deputies Rayburn and Taylor followed at a distance, watching as Carl and the criminal conducted what appeared to be an exchange of money for a package. The package contained only ordinary electronic components, but to observers it could easily have been misinterpreted as equipment for bypassing security systems. "They're documenting everything," Carl told Denise afterward, "building their own case against us." "Good," she replied. "Let them think they're the ones conducting the investigation." The following afternoon, as Carl drove home from the coffee shop, flashing lights appeared in his rearview mirror. Deputies Rayburn and Harris ordered him out of the vehicle with unnecessary aggression, forcing him to kneel on the asphalt with hands behind his head while passing motorists slowed to watch. "We received reports of suspicious activity," Rayburn announced loudly, playing to the audience of onlookers. Without requesting consent, the deputies conducted a thorough search of Carl's vehicle. In the trunk, they discovered the sketches of bank layouts and security details that Carl had deliberately planted. Well, what do we have here?" Rayburn held up the papers triumphantly. "Looks like someone's planning something big." Carl maintained his cover while allowing appropriate levels of nervousness to show. "Those are just designs for expanding the coffee shop. I can explain everything." Deputy Harris smirked. "Sure you can, buddy." Downtown at the station, they handcuffed him and placed him in the back of the patrol car, making a show of the arrest for anyone watching. At the sheriff's station, Carl was taken to an interrogation room where he waited for over an hour, the concealed recording devices in his watch and belt capturing everything. Eventually, Sheriff Holloway entered with Deputy Chief Rayburn. "Mr. Rollins," Holloway drawled, taking a seat across from Carl, "seems like you've been planning more than just serving coffee in our town." While Carl was being questioned, Deputies Harris and Taylor brought Denise in as well, placing her in a separate interrogation room. The deputies employed classic separation tactics, attempting to get each spouse to incriminate the other. "Your husband's already told us everything," Deputy Harris lied to Denise. "Smart move on his part. First one to talk gets the deal." Denise played her role perfectly, appearing frightened yet defiant. "I don't know what you're talking about. We run a coffee shop, that's it." In Carl's interrogation room, Sheriff Holloway's questioning grew increasingly aggressive. "We know about your plans for the Claiborne First National. We know about your Chicago connections. We know about the money laundering through that coffee shop of yours." Carl maintained his innocent businessman persona. "This is all a misunderstanding. Those papers are renovation plans." Holloway slammed his hand on the table. "Cut the crap. We've been watching you for weeks. Meeting with known criminals, casing banks, arguing with your wife about one last job. You think we're stupid." The interrogation continued for hours, with deputies taking turns applying pressure. They denied Carl water and bathroom breaks, classic intimidation tactics that played directly into the FBI's case against them. In the other room, Denise faced her own psychological warfare. Deputy Chief Rayburn alternated between threatening her with decades in prison and offering leniency if she cooperated against her husband. "Pretty lady like you doesn't belong in state prison," he said, his tone inappropriately intimate. "Help us nail your husband, and maybe we can work something out." Denise responded with calculated tears. I told him I didn't want any part of his schemes. We were supposed to start fresh here. Rayburn pounced on this opening. What schemes exactly? Tell me details and I'll make sure the judge knows you cooperated. Throughout both interrogations, the Claiborne officers made critical mistakes. They acknowledged conducting surveillance without warrants. They admitted to entering the Rollins property without probable cause. Most importantly, they revealed their true motivations when they thought the suspects were breaking down. People like you don't just waltz into our town and set up shop, Sheriff Holloway told Carl. We keep Claiborne the way it's supposed to be. After 5 hours of interrogation, the sheriff finally revealed his hand. Here's what's going to happen. You and your wife are going to sign over the deed to your business and home as part of a civil asset forfeiture. You'll then leave Claiborne and never return. Otherwise, you're looking at 20 years minimum for conspiracy to commit armed robbery. Carl feigned desperation. You can't just take everything we've worked for. Holloway leaned forward, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. We can and we have many times before. Ask around. Oh, wait, you can't because those folks aren't here anymore. After 7 hours of interrogation without formal charges being filed, both Carl and Denise were told they were being released, but were not to leave town while deputies obtained a warrant to search their home. One word of this to anyone, Deputy Harris warned as he escorted them out, and conspiracy charges will be the least of your worries. As they drove home, neither spoke until they were inside their house with water running to mask their conversation from any listening devices. They took the bait completely, Denise whispered. Every violation we needed, all recorded. Carl nodded grimly. Holloway's planning to seize everything through civil forfeiture, just like he's done to others. But he made one critical mistake. What's that? He thinks we're actually criminals. He has no idea we're building a case against him. After their release from interrogation, Carl and Denise knew they had limited time before Sheriff Holloway and his deputies would make their next move. They'll be watching us constantly now, Carl said as they conducted a thorough sweep for listening devices in their home. They found one in the living room lamp, another in their bedroom alarm clock, and a third in the kitchen telephone. Rather than removing them, they left the bugs in place, now fully aware of what conversations might be monitored. Working silently, they strategically placed additional recording devices throughout the house, focusing on entry points where deputies would likely come through during a raid. These new devices were military-grade, virtually undetectable, and would activate automatically with motion detection. We need to find out exactly what they're planning, Denise said, writing on a notepad, raid tonight. Carl nodded, then wrote back, need inside info. The next morning, Carl went for his usual jog, knowing he would be followed. He deliberately ran past Deputy Taylor's house just as the young officer was leaving for his shift. Morning, Deputy, Carl called out, stopping to catch his breath nearby. Taylor looked nervous, glancing around to see if anyone was watching their interaction. Mr. Rollins, didn't expect to see you out and about after yesterday. Carl took a chance, lowering his voice. Look, I know you're different from the others. I saw your face when they were searching that family's home last week. You didn't seem comfortable with it. Taylor's expression confirmed Carl's suspicion. I don't know what you're talking about, but his eyes told a different story. Whatever's coming my way, Carl continued. I just want to know if my wife will be safe. She doesn't deserve to be caught up in this. This appeal to Taylor's conscience seemed to strike a chord. After a moment's hesitation, the deputy whispered, There's a raid planned for tonight. Holloway's got a judge to sign off on a warrant based on fabricated evidence. They're planning to plant drugs and stolen money in your house. Taylor looked around again, clearly terrified of being seen talking to Carl. Holloway does this all the time, especially to black folks who seem too successful. Your property gets seized, you get arrested, and by the time you might prove your innocence, everything you own is gone. Why are you telling me this? Carl asked, genuinely curious about the deputy's motivation. Taylor's face showed conflicted emotions. My grandfather was a civil rights activist in Selma. He'd be ashamed of what I've been part of here. But this is my hometown, and speaking up means losing everything. Before walking away, Taylor added one final warning. Whatever you do, be gone by midnight. Holloway personally selected the raid team. They're not the good ones. Carl thanked him with a nod and continued his run, now armed with crucial information. Back at home, he shared Taylor's warning with Denise. They had to prepare quickly while maintaining the appearance of a couple unaware of the coming storm. Denise located their true FBI credentials and a backup satellite phone, secreting them in a specially designed hidden compartment in her wedding ring box that would be overlooked in even the most thorough search. If things go sideways, we need a way to prove who we are, she explained. They spent the afternoon setting their trap. Additional cameras were carefully hidden throughout the house. Key evidence they had gathered was uploaded to the FBI's secure server. Most importantly, they made sure their surveillance systems would continue broadcasting even if the main power to the house was cut. As evening approached, they began their performance for anyone who might be listening through the planted bugs. "We need to get out of town tonight," Carl said loudly in the kitchen. "They're on to us, and I'm not going to jail." Denise played her part. "What about the money? We can't just leave everything behind." Their staged argument escalated, with Carl eventually declaring, "I'm making some calls. We're leaving at 11:30. Pack only what we need." They made deliberate noise of preparations, opening and closing drawers, making brief phone calls with cryptic messages, and loading their car with suitcases. At 11:15, they turned off most lights in the house, but left one on in the bedroom, suggesting they were still packing. In reality, they moved silently to their secure observation point in the attic, where they had monitors showing feeds from all exterior and interior cameras. At 11:45, they observed several unmarked vehicles taking positions around their property. Men in tactical gear emerged, communicating via hand signals. Sheriff Holloway and Deputy Chief Rayburn supervised from a command vehicle parked down the street. "SWAT team for a suspected bank robbery plan," Denise whispered incredulously. "Talk about excessive force." "Exactly what we needed them to do," Carl replied, activating their emergency beacon that would alert Agent Thompson that the raid was beginning. At precisely midnight, the operation began with unnecessary violence. Rather than announcing their presence, officers used a battering ram on the front door. Others simultaneously broke through the back entrance and first-floor windows. The tactical team swept through the house with military-style efficiency weapons drawn, shouting contradictory commands as if expecting armed resistance. "Clear," echoed through various rooms as officers confirmed no one was present. Confused by the Rollins' absence, the team became increasingly destructive. Furniture was overturned, artwork smashed, and personal belongings strewn across floors. "Find them, or," Sheriff Holloway ordered over the radio. "They must still be here somewhere." When officers reported the house was empty and the garage showed the car was gone, Holloway entered personally. "Start the search. Find me something I can use." What followed was a methodical planting of evidence. From their observation point, Carl and Denise recorded Deputy Chief Rayburn removing a package from his tactical vest and placing it in the master bedroom closet. Another deputy planted a gun under the mattress. Sheriff Holloway himself placed bundles of cash in Carl's desk drawer, carefully arranging them to look hidden. "This should be enough for federal charges," Holloway said, unaware his words were being recorded by multiple devices. "Call Judge Patterson. I want arrest warrants ready by morning." Suddenly, the scene changed as dispatch radioed in. "Sheriff, we've located the suspect's vehicle at the bus station in Millerville. Deputies are in pursuit." Holloway smiled triumphantly. "We've got them running." Perfect narrative for the press. As most of the tactical team rushed to their vehicles, Holloway remained behind with deputies Rayburn and Harris. "Make sure everything looks right," he instructed. "I want this airtight when the prosecutors see it. What would you do if you witnessed law enforcement planting evidence in someone's home?" Comment number 1, if you believe police corruption should face the harshest penalties, or number 2, if you think there are always two sides to every story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see how Carl and Denise turn the tables on these corrupt officers. Will justice prevail in Claiborne County? The three officers didn't realize they were walking into a trap of the FBI's making. Carl and Denise had parked their car at the bus station as a diversion, ensuring most of the corrupt officers would be occupied there while the real operation unfolded. Agent Thompson and a team of FBI agents were already positioned nearby monitoring everything. Once most of the sheriff's department had left, Carl and Denise prepared to reveal themselves. "Ready?" Carl asked, checking his concealed weapon. Denise nodded, her expression resolute. "Let's finish this." They silently descended from their hiding place, moving through their own home like the trained federal agents they were. In the living room, Sheriff Holloway was instructing Deputies Rayburn and Harris on how to document their findings to ensure convictions. "The wife's prints need to be on this bag," he was saying, holding up the planted drugs. "Make sure you note that in the—" He froze at the sound of Carl clearing his throat from the hallway entrance. All three officers drew their weapons instantaneously. "Hands up on your knees," Rayburn shouted, his gun aimed at Carl's chest. Carl remained standing, hands slightly raised, but not in full surrender. "I think we all need to calm down and talk about what's happening here." "On your knees now," Harris screamed, advancing aggressively. "You're under arrest." Denise emerged from another doorway, creating a moment of confusion as the officers had to divide their attention. "What are you doing in my house, Sheriff?" she asked calmly. "Especially with all that evidence you just planted." Holloway's expression hardened. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. This county is mine. Nobody will believe a word against me." He nodded to Rayburn. "Cuff them. If they resist, you know what to do." Deputy Rayburn moved toward Carl, handcuffs ready. In one swift motion, he grabbed Carl and slammed him against the wall, pressing his gun against Carl's temple with excessive force. Blood trickled down from where the barrel cut into Carl's skin. "Just another black criminal thinking he's smarter than us," Rayburn sneered. Carl locked eyes with Denise across the room. The subtle nod between them was imperceptible to everyone but them. The trap was indeed set, but not in the way Sheriff Holloway believed. The tension in the Rollins living room was thick enough to cut with a knife as Deputy Rayburn pressed his service weapon against Carl's bleeding temple. Sheriff Holloway watched with a smirk while Deputy Harris kept his gun trained on Denise. "You two thought you could come into my county and operate without my permission," Holloway drawled, circling Carl like a predator. "Nobody runs games in Claiborne without my say-so. Nobody." Carl remained eerily calm, despite the weapon against his head. "There seems to be a misunderstanding, Sheriff." Holloway laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "Oh, we understand perfectly. You're not the first criminals who thought they could set up shop here. Just the latest to learn the hard way who runs things." He nodded to Deputy Harris. "Get them to the station. Private interrogation rooms. No booking paperwork yet." Harris hesitated. "Shouldn't we call it in boss standard procedure?" "Do I look like I care about standard procedure?" Holloway snapped. "This is a special situation. These two need to understand how things work in my county before anything goes on record." The deputies handcuffed Carl and Denise with unnecessary roughness, tightening the metal until it bit into their wrists. They were forced into separate unmarked vehicles and driven to the sheriff's station via back roads. The building was nearly empty at this late hour, with only a skeleton staff manning essential services. Carl was taken to a windowless room in the basement level, an area not covered by the station's official security cameras. Sheriff Holloway and Detective Reynolds, a burly officer known for his harsh interrogation techniques, entered the room after leaving Carl alone for nearly an hour. "So," Holloway began placing a folder on the metal table, "Carl Rollins, or whatever your real name is." He opened the folder, revealing printouts of Carl's movements over the past weeks. Bank visits in 3 counties, meetings with known felons, suspicious cash transactions. He leaned forward. and blueprints for bank security systems found in your home. Care to explain? Carl maintained his cover. Those were renovation plans for the coffee shop expansion. This is all a mistake. Reynolds slammed his fist on the table. The only mistake was thinking you could operate in our jurisdiction without permission. The interrogation quickly took a dark turn. Reynolds circled behind Carl, speaking directly into his ear. You know what happens to uppity black bank robbers in county lockup, especially ones who don't cooperate with the sheriff? Holloway nodded approval as Reynolds continued the psychological pressure. Your pretty wife is in the next room. Deputy Harris has quite a reputation with female suspects. Shame if she had to experience that firsthand. Carl's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he kept his composure. In the adjacent interrogation room, Denise faced similar tactics from Deputy Chief Rayburn and a female deputy named Cooper. We've got your husband dead to rights, Rayburn claimed, showing Denise doctored photos suggesting Carl had already confessed. He's looking at 20 years minimum, but you might walk away if you're smart. Deputy Cooper took a different approach. We know you're not the mastermind here. Your husband dragged you into this. Help yourself before it's too late. Denise portrayed growing distress while actually cataloging every procedural violation and threat for the federal case they were building. Back in Carl's interrogation room, the situation deteriorated further. Reynolds denied him water despite the warm, stuffy conditions. When Carl requested a bathroom break after 3 hours, Holloway laughed. Criminals don't get bathroom breaks. They get consequences. Throughout the ordeal, both Carl and Denise employed FBI resistance techniques, appearing to gradually break down while revealing nothing of value. Carl allowed frustration to show, knowing it would encourage his interrogators to become more explicit in their threats. Look, he finally said, this is all a misunderstanding. We're just running a coffee shop. Reynolds grabbed Carl by the collar, lifting him partially out of the chair. A coffee shop that's a front for bank robbery plans. Stop lying. When Carl asked for a lawyer, Holloway chuckled. Lawyers are for people who've been officially arrested. Right now you're just helping us with inquiries. Off the books. As the night progressed, the deputies became increasingly confident and careless in their statements. You think you're the first out-of-towners who tried setting up shop here? Holloway boasted. We've run off dozens. Some left broke. Some left in cuffs. Some didn't leave at all. He detailed how the department systematically targeted outsiders, especially black business owners who showed signs of prosperity. This county stays exactly how we want it. People know their place or they learn it the hard way. In Denise's room, Rayburn began revealing the department's broader corruption. Sheriff has arrangements with every business in town. Protection fees, advance warnings about inspections, preferred treatment. System works for everyone who plays along. He leaned closer to her. Your mistake was thinking you could operate independently. After 5 hours of interrogation, Reynolds escalated to physical intimidation, knocking Carl's chair backward and pressing a boot against his chest. We can make you disappear, he threatened. Accident during attempted escape. Happens all the time. Holloway nodded his agreement. Nobody would question it. Nobody would even look for you after a while. What they didn't realize was that every word, every threat, every procedural violation was being recorded by multiple devices concealed in Carl and Denise's clothing. Each confession of systemic corruption strengthened the federal case against them. By dawn, the interrogators shifted tactics, presenting the Rollinses with a coercive offer. Sheriff Holloway laid out papers in front of Carl. Here's how this works. You sign over your property and business through civil forfeiture. You admit to planning criminal activity. You leave Claiborne forever, or, he paused for effect, you go to prison for a very long time on charges we'll make stick regardless of the truth. When Carl hesitated, Holloway nodded to Reynolds, who grabbed a plastic evidence bag and removed a small packet of white powder. Amazing what we found hidden in your coffee beans, enough to put you away for distribution. Your fingerprints will be on it by the time it reaches the evidence locker. Carl recognized the moment to push for more incriminating statements. You can't just fabricate evidence and seize people's property. That's illegal. Holloway laughed openly. Welcome to Claiborne County, where I decide what's legal. Been working this system for 15 years. My daddy ran it for 20 years before me. Think anyone's going to stop us now because some black coffee shop owners cry foul? Reynolds leaned forward, his breath hot against Carl's face. You know how many properties we've taken this way? Judge Patterson signs whatever warrants we put in front of him. Prosecutor Jackson brings whatever charges we tell him to. System's locked up tight. In her interrogation room, Denise was presented with a similar choice by Rayburn. Your husband's already agreed to the deal. Sign these papers and you both walk out of here today. Refuse and you're looking at accessory charges. Deputy Cooper added, We've already drawn up the transfer documents for your house and business. Clean break, that's all we want. Denise played her role perfectly, appearing defeated and frightened. You've done this before, haven't you? To other people like us? Rayburn didn't even try to deny it. It's how things work here. Sheriff calls it community improvement. Black businesses don't thrive in Claiborne unless the sheriff approves, and he rarely approves. As morning light began filtering through the station's windows, Sheriff Holloway decided to end the interrogation with a demonstration of power. He returned to Carl's room with a final threat. One way or another, you're losing everything today. Only question is whether you lose your freedom too. To emphasize his point, he nodded to Reynolds, who once again pressed his gun against Carl's temple, this time hard enough to draw fresh blood. Just another black criminal, Reynolds sneered. Carl locked eyes with Denise, who had been brought to the doorway to witness his predicament. The subtle nod between them was imperceptible to everyone but them. The trap was set, and the Claiborne County Sheriff's Department had walked right into it. Just as Detective Reynolds increased pressure on the gun barrel against Carl's bleeding temple, the interrogation room door burst open. Deputy Taylor stood in the doorway, his expression a mixture of fear and determination. "Sheriff, we've got a situation," he blurted out, seemingly unaware of the scene he had interrupted. Holloway turned angrily. "Whatever it is can wait, Taylor. We're in the middle of something here." Taylor shook his head urgently. "No, sir, it can't wait. There are federal agents surrounding the station, lots of them." The announcement landed like a bomb in the small room. Reynolds involuntarily eased pressure on his weapon confusion, replacing his previous confidence. "What federal agents, DEA, ATF?" Taylor's voice trembled slightly. "FBI, sir. At least 20 agents in tactical gear. They're demanding entry and asking for Carl and Denise Rollins by name." Sheriff Holloway's face drained of color, but he quickly recovered. "Some kind of mistake, probably connected to their bank robbery plans. This works in our favor." He turned to Reynolds. "Clean him up. No signs of rough treatment." As Reynolds reluctantly holstered his weapon, Carl spoke for the first time in hours, his voice calm and authoritative. "That won't be necessary, Detective." With his cuffed hands, he reached for his watch and pressed a hidden mechanism. The face slid open, revealing a second smaller compartment containing a folded micro-document. Special Agent Carl Rollins, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Badge number 7726. This building is now part of a federal investigation into civil rights violations and police corruption. The stunned silence that followed was broken by Sheriff Holloway's nervous laugh. "Nice try. A fake badge won't—" "It's not fake, Sheriff," Denise interrupted from the doorway, where Rayburn still held her arm. "And neither is mine." She twisted her wedding ring, revealing a similar hidden compartment with her own credentials. "Special Agent Denise Rollins, FBI. You and your department are under investigation for systematic civil rights violations, evidence tampering, illegal seizure of property, and corruption." Deputy Taylor stepped further into the room, his allegiance now clear. "I let the FBI tactical team into the building, Sheriff. They're securing all exits and evidence rooms as we speak." Holloway's face contorted with rage. "You traitor. Your career is over." "My conscience is clear," Taylor replied quietly. "I've been documenting departmental abuses for months. Just didn't have the courage to come forward until now. The sheriff lunged for his weapon, but before he could draw it, the room filled with FBI agents and tactical gear weapons trained on Holloway and Reynolds. Agent Thompson led the team, directing agents to secure the corrupt officers. James Holloway, Michael Reynolds, you're under federal custody, hands where we can see them. Similar scenes played out throughout the station as FBI agents detained Deputy Chief Rayburn and other officers implicated in the corruption scheme. As agents removed his handcuffs, Carl rubbed his wrists and addressed the shell-shocked sheriff. We've been investigating you for months, Holloway. Every illegal search, every fabricated charge, every piece of planted evidence, all documented and transmitted to FBI headquarters in real time. Denise continued, those bugs you planted in our home, we found them immediately. Every conversation you thought you were secretly monitoring was scripted to lead you exactly where we wanted. More FBI agents entered with evidence collection kits documenting the interrogation room and photographing Carl's injuries. The gun against my head was a nice touch, Carl noted coldly to Reynolds, who now stood handcuffed and ashen-faced. Federal prosecutors love photographic evidence of civil rights violations. Holloway struggled against his restraints. This is my county. You have no jurisdiction here. Agent Thompson stepped forward. Actually, sheriff civil rights violations fall squarely under federal jurisdiction. So does conspiracy against rights, deprivation of rights under color of law, and RICO violations for your little asset seizure scheme. As they were led from the room, Holloway turned to Deputy Taylor. You're dead in this town. Your family, too. Taylor stood his ground. Better than being party to what you've done to innocent people for years. In the main area of the station, Carl and Denise were surprised to see dozens of Claiborne residents, mostly black citizens who had suffered under Holloway's regime, gathered outside the building. News crews had already arrived, cameras capturing the unprecedented scene of a sheriff and his deputies being led out in handcuffs. Agent Thompson briefed the growing crowd of reporters. The FBI has been conducting a months-long investigation into allegations of systematic civil rights abuses, illegal property seizures, and corruption within the Claiborne County Sheriff's Department. Today's actions are the culmination of that investigation. Inside a secure FBI vehicle, Carl and Denise debriefed with their supervisor. You gathered more than enough evidence, Thompson confirmed. The recordings from your home during the illegal raid alone would secure convictions. Add in the interrogation confessions and Deputy Taylor's testimony, and this case is airtight. Denise examined the files Taylor had secretly compiled. He's been documenting abuses for over a year. Just needed someone to take him seriously. What made you help us? Carl asked Taylor, who sat nearby, providing additional details to FBI analysts. The deputy was quiet for a moment. My grandfather marched with Dr. King and Selma. He raised me with those values, but when I joined the department, I gradually accepted things I shouldn't have. Told myself I was just following orders. He looked directly at Carl, watching how they treated you and other black citizens. Eventually, you have to decide what side of history you want to be on. As the FBI secured the station and began the process of seizing records, computers, and evidence of departmental misconduct, more victims came forward. Loretta Jackson from the beauty salon brought documentation of years of harassment. Pastor Warren arrived with church members who had lost homes and businesses to Holloway's corrupt system. We never thought this day would come, an elderly man told Carl, tears in his eyes. Sheriff's family has run this county for 2 generations, thought they were untouchable. By afternoon, FBI forensic teams had discovered the full extent of the corruption. Hidden financial records revealed over $20 million in illegally seized assets over the past decade. Evidence lockers contained planted contraband ready to be used against future targets. Most damning were recordings of phone calls between Holloway and Judge Patterson explicitly discussing which properties to target and how to fabricate probable cause. At FBI headquarters in Atlanta, the director personally congratulated Carl and Denise via secure video link. You've uncovered one of the most egregious cases of systematic civil rights abuses we've seen in decades. The Attorney General has taken personal interest in this case. The following day, as Carl and Denise packed their surveillance equipment from the coffee shop that had never actually served a cup of coffee, local residents gathered outside with handmade signs reading, "Thank you," and "Justice at last." For many, it was the first time they had dared to publicly challenge the sheriff's authority. Pastor Warren organized a community meeting at his church where Carl and Denise, now able to reveal their true identities, explained the investigation process and next steps for the community. "Federal prosecutors will handle the criminal cases," Carl explained to the packed room, "but each of you who lost property through illegal seizures should file for restitution." Denise added, "The FBI's Civil Rights Division will have representatives here next week to take your statements. Every case will be reviewed, every injustice addressed." The residents listened with a mixture of hope and lingering fear. "What happens when the FBI leaves?" one woman asked. "Holloway has friends in high places." "Which is why this investigation doesn't end with Holloway," Carl assured her. "We're following every connection, every corrupt judge and prosecutor who enabled this system." As they prepared to return to Atlanta, Carl and Denise reflected on the community they had briefly been part of. "They've lived under this system for generations," Denise observed. "Recovery won't happen overnight." Carl nodded in agreement. "But it will happen. That's why we do this job." 3 months after the dramatic raid on the Claiborne County Sheriff's Department, Carl and Denise Rollins sat in a federal courthouse in Atlanta, preparing to testify before a grand jury. The wood-paneled waiting room was solemn and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of that night at the sheriff's station. "Ready for this?" Carl asked, adjusting his tie. The cut on his temple had healed, leaving only a faint scar as a reminder of Detective Reynolds' brutality. Denise squeezed his hand. "More than ready. Those people deserve justice." U.S. Attorney Marlene Diaz approached with a confident smile. "The grand jury is very interested in your testimony. The evidence you gathered is extraordinary." Inside the grand jury room, Carl provided detailed testimony about the systematic discrimination they had documented. He described the illegal surveillance, planted evidence, coerced confessions, and pattern of civil asset forfeitures targeting Black residents. Denise followed with equally compelling testimony about the department's financial records, showing how seized assets had been redistributed among Holloway and his inner circle. By week's end, the grand jury returned indictments against Sheriff James Holloway, Deputy Chief Raymond Rayburn, Detective Michael Reynolds, and 8 other deputies on multiple federal charges, including civil rights violations, conspiracy evidence tampering, and RICO violations. Judge Patterson faced separate charges for signing fraudulent warrants and participating in the asset seizure scheme. The case attracted national attention, with major news networks covering the Claiborne corruption scandal as emblematic of systemic racism in law enforcement. CNN interviewed former victims whose lives had been destroyed by Holloway's department. The Washington Post published a detailed investigation tracing the corruption back 2 generations to when Holloway's father had been sheriff. 3 weeks after the indictments, Carl and Denise returned to Claiborne to attend a community healing event organized by Pastor Warren. The town had transformed in their absence. With the corrupt sheriff's department dismantled, interim law enforcement was being provided by state police while a complete restructuring took place. The coffee shop that had served as their cover was now an actual business purchased by Loretta Jackson and her daughter, who had expanded it to include a community center section where residents could access legal resources and support. "We named it Justice Brew," Loretta told them proudly. "Seemed fitting." The broader investigation had revealed the shocking extent of Holloway's corruption network. Over 15 years, his department had illegally seized more than 50 properties and hundreds of vehicles, primarily from Black residents. The total value exceeded $25 million, with assets distributed among department leadership and their allies in county government. As the federal case proceeded, victims came forward with hundreds of instances of abuse, false arrests, and intimidation. Stories emerged of black business owners being driven out of town through systematic harassment of legitimate enterprises, being seized based on fabricated charges of families losing homes passed down through generations. The FBI's Civil Rights Division established a special task force to handle the volume of complaints and restitution claims. By summer, the first wave of seized properties was being returned to rightful owners. Families who had been forced to leave Claiborne years earlier returned to reclaim homes and businesses. The Justice Department established a multi-million-dollar restitution fund for victims who couldn't recover actual property. In a particularly moving ceremony, elderly residents who had lost family land to Holloway's father in the 1970s received compensation and formal apologies from federal officials. Deputy Nathan Taylor received mixed reactions from the community. Some viewed him as a hero for eventually doing the right thing, while others questioned why he hadn't come forward sooner. Taylor chose to leave law enforcement, instead establishing a community oversight committee to monitor police practices in Claiborne. "I was complicit for too long," he acknowledged during a town hall meeting. "I can't undo that, but I can help make sure it never happens again." In July, the first trials began. Sheriff Holloway, facing the most serious charges, maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. His defense attorney attempted to portray the FBI investigation as outside interference in local affairs, but the strategy failed when jurors saw video of Holloway personally planting evidence in the Rollins home and threatening them during interrogation. Deputy Chief Rayburn opted for a plea deal, providing testimony against Holloway in exchange for a reduced sentence. His detailed account of the department's target list of black businesses and homeowners further strengthened the prosecution's case. Detective Reynolds and most other deputies went to trial, with all but one receiving guilty verdicts in substantial prison sentences. One autumn afternoon, Carl received an unexpected call from FBI Director Sullivan. "The Attorney General is impressed with your work in Claiborne," Sullivan began. "We're establishing a new civil rights enforcement division focused specifically on investigating law enforcement corruption. We'd like you and Denise to lead it. The promotion would mean moving to Washington, increased resources, and the authority to investigate similar cases nationwide." Before accepting, Carl and Denise requested one final visit to Claiborne. They wanted to see the community's progress and speak with those they had helped. During this visit, they met with Pastor Warren and the newly formed community council that was helping reshape the county's governance. "You've given us back our dignity," one elderly woman told them, holding Carl's hands in hers. "For the first time in my life, I'm not afraid when I see a police car." The transformation wasn't complete, and challenges remained. Some white residents resented the federal intervention, and tensions occasionally flared. But substantive change was undeniably underway. The interim sheriff, an experienced state police captain, had implemented bias training and community oversight. County commissioners had established new procedures for property seizures with multiple levels of review. Most importantly, residents who had lived in fear for generations were finally speaking openly about their experiences. On their last evening in Claiborne, Carl visited the small memorial garden the community had created to honor victims of police brutality and corruption. As he placed flowers beside the monument, a young boy approached him. "My grandpa says you're the FBI agent who took down the bad sheriff. Is that true?" Carl smiled gently. "It wasn't just me. It was your grandpa and everyone else who had the courage to tell their stories." Later that night, Carl made a personal visit that he had postponed throughout the investigation. 30 minutes outside Claiborne, in a small cemetery surrounded by oak trees, he knelt beside a grave marked James Rollins, 1985-2015, beloved son and brother. Carl placed his hand on the headstone, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's done, little brother. They can't hurt anyone else." The truth that had never appeared in any official FBI report was deeply personal. Carl's younger brother James had been killed during a traffic stop in Claiborne County 10 years earlier. The official report claimed he had reached for a weapon, but witnesses described an unprovoked shooting by deputies under Sheriff Holloway's command. The case had been quickly closed. The evidence buried the witnesses intimidated into silence. When the FBI began investigating civil rights violations in Claiborne, Carl had volunteered immediately, not revealing his personal connection. Only Denise knew the truth. The mission had never been just another assignment for him. It had been a quest for justice that the system had previously denied. The next morning, as they prepared to leave Claiborne for the last time, Denise asked Carl about their future. "Do we take the promotion, lead the new division?" Carl looked out at the town that had changed both the community and themselves. There are other Claibornes out there, other corrupt systems destroying lives, other families still waiting for justice. Denise nodded, understanding completely. Washington, it is then. 2 weeks later, they stood in the Attorney General's office, accepting leadership of the new Civil Rights Enforcement Division. Their first assignment already waited on their desk: reports of systematic discrimination and property seizures targeting Black and Latino residents in a county in Arizona. The pattern was disturbingly familiar. That evening, as they reviewed case files in their new office, Carl placed his brother's photo on his desk. The fight for justice would continue, one corrupt department at a time. What would you do if you witnessed injustice in your community? Would you have the courage to stand up like Deputy Taylor eventually did, or would you remain silent out of fear? This story reminds us that systemic racism requires systemic solutions, and sometimes justice comes from unexpected places. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, subscribe to support more content that exposes hard truths, and share with someone who needs to understand these realities. Comment below with your thoughts on how we can better hold law enforcement accountable in our communities. Thank you for joining me for Shadows of Justice. Remember that the path to change begins when brave individuals refuse to accept injustice as normal. This powerful story illustrates how systemic racism often hides behind badges and legal procedures, creating a corrupt ecosystem that targets people based on their race. The Claiborne County Sheriff's Department represents how racism can become institutionalized, using civil asset forfeiture and false charges as weapons against Black citizens. Carl and Denise's undercover mission demonstrates that fighting injustice requires evident strategy and unwavering commitment. The story teaches us that corruption thrives in silence. For years, Holloway's department operated unchallenged because victims feared speaking out, and those within the system, like Deputy Taylor, hesitated to break ranks. True change began only when brave individuals decided the truth mattered more than personal safety. Perhaps most importantly, Shadows of Justice reminds us that accountability is possible even within seemingly impenetrable systems. The FBI agents' methodical documentation exposed not just individual bad actors, but an entire corrupt network. This underscores that addressing racial injustice requires dismantling systems, not just punishing individuals. Finally, Carl's personal connection to the injustice, his brother's death, shows how trauma can be channeled into purposeful action. His professional skills combined with personal motivation created a powerful force for change, suggesting that justice work is most effective when it connects to our deepest values. What moments of injustice have you witnessed but remained silent about? Would you have the courage to be like Deputy Taylor, who eventually chose his conscience over his career? Or would you be bold enough to be like Carl and Denise, deliberately confronting corruption despite the personal risks? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help more people discover it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose the realities many face every day. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how systemic racism operates. Sometimes the most important conversations start with a shared story. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on how communities can better hold law enforcement accountable. Your voice matters in this ongoing conversation about justice and equality. Thank you for joining me for Shadows of Justice. Remember, in the face of injustice, silence is complicity, and speaking truth to power is how change begins.